So today I am pleased to moderate this roundtable, which is an alliance chat on strengthening Black business. My name is Carolyn Johnson. Most people call me CJ. Feel free to do the same. I'm just honored to get up every day and work with the amazing staff and consultants and partners of the Black Cultural Zone Community Development Corporation and our founders, the East Oakland Black Cultural Zone Collaborative. This collaborative was formed in 2014 in response to the evident decline in Black businesses along the East 14th Street corridor. And it was designed to hold place for Black business and entrepreneurs and artists and residents in Oakland, and particularly East Oakland, which is a legacy Black community. I just want to share a bit about our vision for Black business and introduce our panel. Our vision is really for a robust and vibrant renaissance in legacy Black communities, vibrant, thriving Black arts and culture and commerce and a thriving economy. And our mission is to unapologetically center Black arts and culture and economics as we collectively design, resource, transform, and build collective power for our communities. So today we have an amazing array of panelists who will engage in a conversation on how to do this, how to strengthen Black business. So our speakers include Ms. Alondra Williams-Vasquez, the Fresno Regional Manager at Community Vision, a leading person in the Black Central Valley that develops and designs Black business support networks. We also have Carla Buggs, the founder and CEO at Black Bay Area Market. This is an online multi-industry Black business directory and resource. We have Mr. Donell Johnson Jr. from the Mandela Grocery Collective. His job is to help shift to a cooperative ownership model of Black businesses. And Councilmember Loren Taylor from District 6 in the city of Oakland, a public policy and cross-civic sector perspective he'll provide today with deep roots and knowledge of East Oakland. So let's get started. Please feel free to use the chat available to you to engage with us here, because this is a conversation. We welcome your comments and questions as we navigate the next 42 minutes on this topic. And know that the conversation and action will continue beyond just this session, because when you strengthen Black business, we strengthen our community for all. So I want to start first, and I'm going to tell the panelists this is a chat and a conversation, but I'm going to start with Alondra and asking the question, and we'll follow with Donell, with Carla, Donell, and then Councilmember Taylor. And the first question I have for you today is, what is the legacy of Black people and Black business in Fresno, Oakland, and East Oakland? And what is being done to build upon this legacy in these areas? I'll start with you, Alondra.
Thank you, CJ. So I've noticed that just over the course of time and throughout history, specifically for our areas, we've just noticed a lot of Black entrepreneurs. We're innovative, we're powerful, we go out, we're visionaries, but a lot of times we just didn't have access to the proper resources to continue to launch our businesses and create the business growth models that most other businesses have the opportunity to create. So while we are continuously, working and building and networking, I've noticed a trend of people being shut out of the opportunities or the knowledge and wisdom of being able to move their businesses forward into the wealth growth model, meaning that we're often renting our spaces, or we often are operating micro businesses, which are very, very important to the ecosystem of the entrepreneurial and economy. But we need to educate ourselves in the manner of land acquisition, being able to scale our businesses properly, being able to grow our employees as far as the numbers, and to be able to provide adequate pay scales and adequate benefits packages and so on and so forth, like many of our other Caucasian counterparts are doing. And I noticed that a lot of the people that I deal with here are not educated in the pre-development portion of business growth, and therefore sometimes lose money lots and lots of money in those areas, as far as like even zoning, educating themselves in zoning or urban planning and those sorts. So those are some of the things that I've seen. But I noticed that there are a lot of people who are really good at networking, and they've been educating themselves and really pushing through this time, especially during COVID, where a lot of people kind of lose it. But I noticed that people who have been used to reinventing themselves are continuing to escalate and thrive and grow and reinvent themselves to become movers and shakers in our communities.
Wonderful. Thank you, Alondra. Welcome, Carla. I want to repeat the question in case you didn't hear it, but I'm sure you may have. What is the legacy of Black people and Black business in Oakland and East Oakland, and what's being done now to build upon that legacy of Black business in the Bay Area?
I think things like this are absolutely our legacy for the future going forward. I think as every day we're all reinventing ourselves, like she said. And it's an amazing thing to watch people who are ultimately overnight have changed business models and are continuing to push through in spite of, a pandemic. We got police killings. And in spite of all that, we can all still push forward. I mean, the fact that we're doing that is a legacy alone.
And I'll pass the question on to Donell. What's our legacy?
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
I want to say the legacy is for our businesses to survive now. I can say with being a part of Mandela Grocery Cooperative for over 10 years, and for us to be able to continue to be a resource for the community, because that's how we really view ourselves. I really feel like that is the legacy that we need to build now. And moving forward, because when we look into the past, we can see that the things that we're doing right now is how we were able to survive. As we continue to keep on building relationships with smaller businesses and Black-owned businesses, that's primarily where it comes from, where we got to continuously work together so we can all thrive and lift each other up. I can say for us right now, we're building and trying to strengthen the relationship with the Black farmers out in Fresno. And continue to build upon the small businesses that we've already brought into our store. And as long as we survive, we can continue to have a market for a lot of those other small Black-owned businesses. And from my limited capacity of understanding the history in West Oakland, where we did have a lot of thriving Black businesses on 7th Street, and us just being able to also be placed in that same location. And build upon what was already established there before, and then there was nothing for a while, and now we're back. That's basically how I see it. Is just understanding that history and the legacy that we did have, and doing the things that we need to do today, and continue to strengthen our relationships moving forward, so we can look back and see that these were the steps that we were taking in order to uplift the whole community and all of our businesses here in Oakland.
Wonderful. Thank you. Councilmember Taylor.
So I guess my response is that our legacy is of our past, where we are today, and our future is about us stepping up where the system is not serving us. We've got the example of Mandela Groceries. We've got the example of the West Oakland Health Center. We've got the example of all of these institutions that when with the West Oakland Health Center, when the county health system, the public health system wasn't serving Black people in West Oakland, we created our own health system because we knew we needed to make sure that we were looking out for our own, that we provided the resources needed. We see that same history in a number of examples. As a third generation Oaklander whose parents moved here in the 40s from Louisiana and Mississippi, we had a strong Black economy. Now, we had to face the systemic issues of redlining and other institutional racism, but we pulled together as community to create these opportunities to make sure that we had the corner stores, make sure we had the barbershops, the banks, the grocery stores, those things that were needed and vital towards our community. And that's what I'm seeing now is a reconnection and a refocus on that, because recognizing that we can't just sit around waiting for it to come. And so I know we're going to get into some of the things that we're all kind of working towards, but as Oakland has moved from almost half of the population being Black in the late 80s to now 23% and still declining today, we also see the Black businesses that have dwindled and gone away. We see our historically and predominantly Black districts and regions of the city that are similarly losing their businesses and not having the amenities that so many neighborhoods take for granted. And so that's what our legacy is, what's going to set us up for being able to counter this and make sure that we continue to thrive coming out of the pandemic, but then just coming out of the other challenges that we face as a community.
Thank you. And if I can be so bold as to try to summarize a little bit, it sounds like our legacy here is the legacy of our history in this country, in that we have insurmountable odds that are placed against us, and yet we still rise, and yet we still try, and yet we still attempt to move forward. Despite the barriers, the structures that are in place, we fall down and we get back up. And I wonder from that perspective, me also having a resident of East Oakland, born and raised, and having seen the neighborhood change from being 100% Black-owned businesses to what we see now, how are we going to get back up? And specifically, I'll start with you, Alondra, in Fresno as well as in Oakland. What are some of the barriers that we need to actually call out and identify that Black entrepreneurs are experiencing right now in terms of us getting back up, not to just survive, but to thrive? And how, if at all, are these barriers being addressed or adjusted? Alondra.
So thank you for that question. So some of the things that I've seen is just the education portion, and it's not necessarily scholastic education or going to an institution, but just doing the research, networking properly, and there are a lot of people that I know that are entrepreneurs here that have learned the art of networking and expanding their circles to get the necessary knowledge to move forward, get the necessary training, tap into those resources that are actually, a lot of them are free. I've mentioned the lack of understanding how zoning works and even what redlining is, the lack of understanding urban planning. I worked in the planning department in the city of Fresno for a couple of years, and prior to that, worked in the planning department at the Fresno Housing Authority, and was in each department. The higher that I went, and actually in that arena, we're not there. We're not represented there as equally as everyone else. And when I worked in the private sector in construction for a construction company, the different developers that I would meet, those arenas, those circles, we are not equally represented there. But those are the circles that are really amassing the wealth. Those are the people who own the dirt. The dirt equates to wealth building. And so even if you're leasing or, say that you're getting ready to go and build, whether it's a ground up or whether you're purchasing, an existing building, understanding how to navigate the government processes that were kind of created to shut us out, and also learning how to, line up the use of your building, what you're going to use it for, what you're going to do. If you're a doctor's office, your use is going to be an office use or medical office use, and so forth. Just understanding what you can and cannot do. There are so many times I've seen people lease properties and they plan to run their business, and then they hit the zoning area and find out that their use is not allowed. So little things like that. And if you don't know how to navigate those processes, building that circle to encumber people who also know that portion of the business. You don't have to know everything. You just need to know someone who knows it. And then just being able to support one another in those endeavors. It's a little bit, our culture down here is a little bit different than the Bay Area and Southern California. But if we could just manage also to come together and network with each other in a manner that is in building healthy relationships with one another, being able to, as I say, alley-oop each other instead of I got to get there first, then we could make, we have so many intelligent, creative, powerful people, And these entrepreneurs that have stood the test of time, even in micro businesses, being able just didn't, even if they haven't scaled yet, being able to build powerful networks it could be the difference between making it and being non-existent, by 2021. They have statistics out right now that 40% of Black businesses are not going to survive COVID. Well, I'm here to say no, we'll survive and we'll thrive. But I think one of the most valuable tools that you can get is the knowledge. And if you don't know everything, because I don't know any one person who does, build a network of people who knows, I just need somebody that knows this, and I just need somebody that knows that. And I harp on the construction field and land ownership and planning, because that's my background. But if we need to build healthy networks, so that we can all thrive, because we can do more together than we can apart. I hope I answered that. I was kind of going on for a minute. So
you did great, Alondra. Don't you worry. You did great. We're going to pass it on to Carla. What are the barriers and what are we doing about them?
I kind of would piggyback on everything Alondra said. I don't think she left anything out. But really, I don't think that as entrepreneurs, a lot of the entrepreneurs, however, don't plan. They're not doing the research to really know about their industries. And sometimes are not even qualified to be in those industries because they have not done. Use for instance, do you know what the ingredients, chemical reactions are once you put them in the jar? Just because you know what shea butter is doesn't mean that you know what shea butter does. So I think we need to really look at making sure, like you said, we do the research, we do the planning, and really try to develop some really strong businesses and really look at, I don't think we solve problems. We want to sell products, but we aren't selling products that solve a problem. We're just selling a product. So it means that we're all a commodity because we're all competing against each other. And so it really waters down the market for everybody. I think we also kind of water down the definition of an entrepreneur and a business owner. We call hobbyists entrepreneurs and are putting them in the same bucket as someone like he has a grocery store. We have to be okay with calling people out at where they are and what that lane is and be okay with it. And people have to be okay with, I didn't know that I was in that lane. I thought this was what a business owner was. I thought I was an entrepreneur, and be okay with finding out you're not. And oftentimes people are not okay when you tell them you're not what you think you are. And we have a lot more work to do because they think they're further along in the process. So I think we all have to, one of the barriers is just being open to that criticism, planning, researching, especially doing that networking that she's talking about. I know that's how I grew both of my brands, is merely from networking, hustling. You're not going to sleep, so it's not going to come overnight. Don't think that that's the way it happens. Like, you're not going to eat, you're not going to sleep. And if you're eating and sleeping, you're probably not an entrepreneur. I'm just keeping it real, but if it's easy for you, you're doing it all wrong, or you somebody special that's outside of the rest of us, because it's not an easy feat. But, find your tribe, hold on to each other, support each other every day. I know I have a group of 40 women that we connect every single day, and I could not do anything that I do ever without that support.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Carla. Donell, barriers, and what are we doing about them?
I definitely agree with everybody has brought up, especially with planning. And those are physical things that are challenges and hurdles that we need to get over. But for me, I think a big thing for our community and a lot of entrepreneurs is the mental aspect behind it. And it's twofold, where we are all dealing with a lot of trauma that's been handed down from generation to generation. And we have to give each other a little bit of grace when we are working with one another. I find that we are the toughest critics on ourselves and each other. And so that's one thing, and just really recognizing that. And then there is an aspect of courage and being an entrepreneurship. Being an entrepreneur and a business owner really takes a lot of courage and will and determination in order to see the results that you desire. And I feel like just being a part of a cooperative, we naturally are in a middle ground. Because I say for our people, we need to have more ownership, but how can you go from saying from not having any ownership, and our lessons have been to go to school and get a good job, which I have done, and then saying have some ownership, and there's nothing in the middle. And I really feel like that's what really brought me to the cooperative. And that I wrote down some of these things that were brought up on really understanding your lane, and really you don't know the information. And when you are in the cooperative, we become so diverse in the skills that we bring together and we already naturally have a common goal of the success of a single business that we're able to understand and identify the lanes that we do stay in. Like, for example, at the grocery store, I am one of the tech people there. And some other people aren't trying to fake whether or not they're the tech person. So, people come to me and I stay in my lane and really try to, build our business from that aspect, technology wise. And it's just always mental. And I can say that I will definitely go back to self-care on handling the trauma. I know that personally I have my own, therapy and counsel, and some of the relationships that I'm in, I will have separate counsel for that as well. And just really identify that we are all, working with a lot of trauma. We just don't give each other grace. And we really need to have that, because we really need to work cooperatively in order for us to uplift each other. And I think that's what Carla was saying, like, know your lane. And we're just so critical of each other, and you have to be able to give and receive and just be okay with that. And building each other up. So,
thank you, Donell. Councilmember Taylor.
Absolutely. So I agree with everything that's said. I think those are great. As I was sort of prepping for this, I thought about 5 key things. First of all, capital, which I think everyone agrees with, accessing capital, and the challenge with not having that financial backing and support that many entrepreneurs from other backgrounds and ethnicities might bring in, given sort of those opportunities that they have. So with that, there are things that we could and should be doing relative to lowering barriers of accessing the capital, changing the lending and capital access requirements, the risk levels. When we've got certain risk models that lenders have, how are we perhaps preparing ourselves to be better positioned, but then also how are we working with some of those lenders that have a greater, I would say, appetite to supporting entrepreneurs that changes their risk model, where they can actually, lend at a different level. I think some of the things that we're doing from the city standpoint is looking at, well, what can we do relative to potentially putting some lending of capital out there for, say, pre-development loans, and tying back the sort of the repayment to the completion of a project, a development project or what have you. Also looking at how we can better support cooperative ownership models that by in and of themselves allow for greater access to capital through cooperation, as Donell was describing. The second thing for me is on the real estate side, creating more opportunities for community assets that could be jointly owned by the community for public good. We have public assets and resources. The city owns certain properties. Can we repurpose those in a way that allows for a springboard and on-ramp for our businesses as they're growing and maturing to have access there? When we also look at, I guess the third piece that I thought about was when it comes to back-end support, we've got, a lot of our businesses don't necessarily have as strong of that back-end operations, whether it's accounting, the finance piece, the IT infrastructure. And if there's a way that we can collaborate collectively, create that back-end model and provide those resources, that support. Legal is another one, having a legal background and asset, pulling our resources and supporting that access as folks grow and scale their business is another one. Also on the list that I had is navigating the landscape. And I appreciate Alondra sort of highlighting some of those aspects of just, we need greater knowledge of the elements of zoning, planning, and from my perspective, navigating the city government. As a city council member, I've got people knocking on my door asking for meetings on a monthly basis to try and convince me of how the city is or is not working for their business. Most of them are not Black. Our Black businesses don't really know and aren't as knowledgeable about how to engage and how others are doing that to really push the system so that it does work for them. And so that's one that I think we need to get more knowledgeable about. How are we leveraging the resources that are there, whether it's the Business Assistance Center, SBA resources with the Small Business Administration. Similarly, and I do want to appreciate the emphasis on us working together, because that's how we can move some of these systems that are in place is through collaborative operation. Showing up in mass at a council meeting as a critical decision is being made. We don't have to go to every council meeting, but we need to stay plugged in to know when critical mass is valuable for easing that aspect of the landscape. So I think that's a critical piece. And then the access to opportunities is one that I think is a barrier, but one that we can address. I'm going to take a pause right here and just plug. If anybody is not squarely focused on Prop 16 in this election, then you are missing the boat. We need to make sure that when it comes to Prop 209, repealing that we actively engage and vote for Prop 16 that will allow us to address those disparities that have existed and got worse once Prop 209 came out. So using our collaborative political voice as a way of addressing some of the gaps and challenges with opportunities, but then also locally, one of the things is that our local governments have the opportunity through disparity studies to develop both race neutral as well as race conscious strategies that, when sort of backed up by a real sort of study and analysis, we can start to implement, i.e. those who are looking for contracts with our city government. We can, change how we do that contracting relative to local small business minority support. And so that's another area that we can address the barriers as a way of creating greater opportunities. So those are the ones that I had thought through to layer on top of what our other panelists described.
Such a scholar. You just thought through 5 amazing things. I love it. I love the emphasis on 3 things that I just want to kind of summarize. One is sort of that focus on you and who you are as an entrepreneur and the work that you have to do to educate yourself, to understand the rules of the game, to deal with the trauma, and to be ready to be an entrepreneur. Like Carla said, and I totally agree. If you're an entrepreneur, you're getting 8 hours of sleep a night, you're probably not an entrepreneur. It takes a lot. It takes a lot of energy and study. It is a calling and not a hobby. Hobbies are great, but to be an entrepreneur, you really have to educate yourself. And I love Alondra's point around networking and making connections. None of us have all of the answers, but between all of us, we have all that we need. And then, getting your business and what the resources that it needs is also work, right? And to do that collectively and collaboratively is best. And that collective collaborative model is African and Black centered. It is the way we were before we were brought here, and the way we've been, and the way we survive. And then I think I appreciate the other points around holding our institutions accountable. Cities, states, and counties, they hold the people's money. They hold the people's property. Investors and banks and pension funds. Those pension funds primarily come from frontline workers who tend to be Black and brown. And so holding those groups accountable, it's really important to see. The next question I want to move to is really around thinking about the journeys that all of you took and your grandparents and great-grandparents took to leave the South, to come here, what their vision was for themselves, for their family, for the business, and where we are today and how different it probably is. And so what role does intergenerational vibrancy and vision play in strengthening our place in these communities as Black businesses? And I'll start again with Alondra.
Yes, I would say it plays a vital role. It's the very foundation in which we've built our lives, and holds the cornerstones of who we actually become as adults. My grandparents came from Pine Bluff, Arkansas. And then we got people in Little Rock and Hot Springs, they migrated to California looking for better opportunities. My grandmother was a housekeeper. My grandfather was in the military for a time, sustained an injury, and then they heavily relied on my grandmother's income. And my grandfather worked odd jobs. They had 6 children. They raised them, partially in Arkansas and the rest, in California. Ended up in LA first, migrated to Fresno. But they followed the jobs. They were following the work. And as other family members, wanted to relocate, they housed everybody. And then everybody, once they were able to get up, they moved out. And, everybody was just, we were heavily reliant on our family members for support in every area, especially during an age where my grandparents were, I think, growing up on the uptick of the Great Depression, and just that whole mentality, just bringing it. You worked as a network to bring people into a healthy space, and then after, sorry, I've got my bosses trying to do something over here. So then after a while, growing up, I grew up in a single parent household. My mother was a single mother of 4 girls. And I eventually, ended up, I was going down the road of being a statistic. But my mother, kind of came in and intervened, her and my uncle. My uncle was a Harvard graduate, a law student. My mother went to Fresno State, graduated with her education to be an educator. And they built those things into us, even though we were in certain situations. I ended up being a teenage parent, and I was a single mother of 7 for quite some time. But my mother and my uncle hammered certain aspects into us that made me realize growing up, raising my children on aid was not the best way to do it. So I had to knuckle up and, be on my own and fight through some things with the support of, my mother and a couple of other, family members that really saw me trying to help myself after a while. But I built those same things into my kids. I was like, okay, well, before they graduate high school and get into college, I need to get my degree so I can be that example and tell them, okay, go to college. And not that college is the best place for everyone to go, because we know that you can sometimes we go to college and we end up graduating with massive debt. So, and, which is counterproductive. And then a lot of times we go to college and don't even end up working in the industries that we went to college for. So just being able to give my children, the same things that I was given by, hey, work hard. Hey, believe in yourself. Hey, don't speak in Ebonics all the time. They wouldn't let me, I couldn't hardly have a conversation with my uncle without him correcting every single thing. It became so annoying that I just learned how to talk the way he wanted to talk so I could actually get my point across. But, it's little things like that help me, of course we call it code switching nowadays. And some people are like, we really shouldn't have to code switch. But at the time, that's what helped me to sustain my family, as I was able to talk on the phones, and I was naturally inquisitive. So I just started asking questions and began to, somewhat better myself. But at the end of the day, if I would not be where I'm at right now without my grandparents' influence, without my uncle and my mother's influence, without certain cousins, without the people that we meet in these different arenas, it's a foundational part. And the difference, I think, between us and our children's generations is that sometimes somewhere in the midst of that, it kind of broke down. And with the things that they face nowadays, we were not facing those things growing up. They're dealing with a whole different gambit of situations. And so we have to be very intentional in what we are placing into our children so that they can be successful, because the system is not built to help them succeed. The system is built to help them enter the penal system, be, generationally impoverished, and not ever think about becoming a business owner. Right. So we have to do our due diligence in our children to build those things up, just like our they are ancestors, I guess, in a way, but not so far back, just like our grandparents did for us. Yeah. So, very vitally important.
Great. Thank you, Alondra. Carla.
Turned off my mic. I mean, like Alondra, my grandparents moved here from Shreveport, in Monroe, Louisiana. My grandfather was in the service. I remember my grandmother working for Del Monte. So I remember the vibrancy of Oakland and what it used to be. Like Granny Goose and her friends worked at Mother's Cookies. So I remember a time where Oakland was completely different, where there was like a Black-owned business on every block, so to speak, in East Oakland. And I think it's important for us all to remember those things and kind of look back at what that generation before us had really created and think about, now that we're entrepreneurs, how difficult that actually had to be. Because when I think about how difficult it is for me right now, I think about it was twice as hard for them, and it makes me not complain and just kind of push through. Because you're like, girl, this ain't nothing compared to what I'm sure they had to go through even just to get a job. So the fact that we can have businesses, have control of them, go downtown and fill out your own paperwork, sign your signature on there, is huge. And I don't think we think about it in those terms on how far we really have become. But that's what I kind of look at, is generationally how far we have come. We may not be where we want to be, but we definitely are further along than we used to be. So I try to stay focused on that and trying to include the youth in planning. I think we can't really plan for a future if we don't have the future in the room. So it's important to kind of keep the youth involved. I know I'm getting my kids involved in my business. My daughter is actually going to run it and not me. So I'm super excited about it, not just because it's something less for me to do, but just the fact that it took 3 years to convince her to do this. And now she's finally on a page of saying, okay. And it's honestly because of a white boss that she made this decision. So I think she had to have her own experiences before she was ready to really move into business and understand why being an entrepreneur is so important to me. So I think as we continue to push on, if we're just consistent and allow the people after us to really see what it looks like and what it takes to do this, I think that's part of it. That's what I want to leave as a legacy, is just I made sure that I gave it 150% so they will continue my legacy on.
Beautiful. Before we go to Donell, Carla, I didn't know you were from Shreveport, Monroe. We might be cousins. We're going to check that out later. All right. Okay. Donell, let's talk a little bit about intergenerational vibrancy.
I can say for myself personally, this information is very, very important. I'm inspired to continue to reach out to some of my family members to understand more, because I know on my father's side, my grandmother on that side, I want to know more about what brought the family from Arkansas to California, because that's a missing piece. And then on my mother's side, my family is from Faraday, Louisiana. So I definitely understand from some of the stories that it was very country. I remember one of my great uncles and my grandfather talking about them walking miles with no shoes on. So they were brought to California for more opportunity. And I think I want to talk more about them on what was it exactly, but I just oversimplified it. It's like very country. So coming to California in one of the cities is a better opportunity, but I want to know specifically. So I do have a better understanding on my dad's side, my grandfather's family, and what brought them to California. One of my great aunts, and my grandfather has about 13 brothers and sisters. So one of my great aunts had moved to San Diego, California. I believe one of her husband was in the Navy. So they were moved to San Diego for a better opportunity. They're from Midland, Texas, Odessa, Midland. And then one of my other then followed along, and then that's where my grandfather ended up being brought into San Diego. So he just ended up planting his roots and meeting my grandmother there, and just kind of like moved out and branched out to like Southern California in the Pomona area. So then my father ended up all my life, he joined the Marines, and then after that he I guess he obtained a lot of discipline from that experience and became his own entrepreneur. That's all I've seen all my life. He was in stucco, and my parents weren't well off. So a lot of the times I had to spend time at both my mom and my dad's job. So my dad was doing stucco at a lot of the new home construction around San Diego. What was the area? La Jolla, and Mira Mesa, all of the large homes out there. So I was subconsciously being implanted with my dad's entrepreneurial spirit. He went into janitorial, and then eventually went into final construction cleaning. So this is all I've seen all my life. And it just goes back. I was kind of laughing as I was thinking about it because Carla said, know your lane. And my dad doesn't know everything. My dad is very great just with operations, but the back and then we don't have any back end understanding as well. And that's exactly how who my dad was. But he knew that I was fully capable, younger person in the family. And so, to be honest, just seeing my dad go through these struggles was great. But then he also brought me in to do a lot of the paperwork. Like I created the bill in the proposals for the business. I created the logo. I was like 10 and 11 years old in the office, spending hours doing that. And so just me seeing my dad do it, but then just going through it with him and growing through the business with him just kind of gave me that courage that a lot of us don't have. And that's why I always circle back around to that mental aspect. But my dad was one of the folks in our community that did say, go to school and get a good job, and not necessarily show me that or just talk to me about it. Like being an entrepreneur and a business owner is a lane for me to go to.
Yes.
So I had to go through all my growing pains and being in the biotech and the food tech industry to circle right back around to being my own, entrepreneur, being a co-owner of a grocery store. I'm also a consultant in point of sale and food safety. And I also have my own personal cleaning business. So it's very important. So I know that I have a son now, and I will definitely build upon all of the things that my dad didn't know, and what in building all the knowledge that I've gained and giving him a foundation. So it's our job from generation to generation to give the younger generations a foundation, and they're supposed to build on top of that. I feel like I've done that. My dad did a good job to instill that courage and that tenacity in surviving on your own. And I want to be able to give my son that, give him a better understanding of finances, give him a better understanding of all the pillars of ownership, business and real estate and stocks, in order to continue to build wealth.
Yes.
And I think is very important for us to really understand that, so we can give that information to the next generation.
Wonderful. Thank you, Donell. And Councilmember Taylor, you have the amazing task of answering this question in 60 seconds, and I know you can do it.
All right. Challenge. So I would say I agree with what everyone's saying. I appreciate the stories about family connectivity intergenerationally. When I take a look at my seat, I'm looking at the fact that not all of us have that family connection. Not all of us have a grandparent that we are connected to, that then we could pass along or gather that information. So first and foremost, for me, intergenerational vibrancy has to do with maintaining that connection between different generations within our community and creating and fostering those opportunities. We can't talk about intergenerational aspects unless we talk about knowledge transfer, wealth transfer, succession planning. And those are absolutely critical as part of the discussion, and not just within family, but within the community. As a member of the 100 Black Men organization, we have this motto, they will be what they see. And so modeling and giving folks opportunities to see entrepreneurship, what that is, what the opportunity is that's held up for them, and then create that connectivity with entrepreneurs. If we have someone like Carla, whose daughter is not interested, unfortunately she is, but is not interested in taking on a family business, how can we help groom someone else in the community to help build that and move it forward when she's ready to move on? Similarly, we have to talk about estate planning and the probate system and how that removes wealth from our community and extracts that. And so how do we, from that governmental side and other policies, make sure that we're able to retain that wealth and address those gaps, the divides that exist? So I think that was more than 60 seconds, but that's a few points to throw in.
Thank you so much. And thank you, panelists. I mean, what I take from this is reaching back to move forward. Don't give up. Work as a team, collaborate. We can't do it without each other. That's our history. Let's move that forward. And let's really focus on a vision for the future that isn't grounded in where we are right now. That we can have economic independence. We can have economic power, and our businesses can thrive. Stay in our lanes, build your tribe. The ultimate base of Black power is Black business and Black assets and Black collaboration. And so we can do that. So I invite you all to dream big, reach out to these folks for support. And I want to thank each and every one of you for joining us on this panel. And let's take a step today and tomorrow and every day to strengthen Black businesses in our economy. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. And I invite all of you to continue to join this conversation that we're having in this conference and move to the next future sessions, virtual sessions. Thank you, everyone.